Imagine this. 1944. Delegates from 44 allied nations gather at the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. In that room, they're about to make a decision that will shape the global economy for the next 80 years. Britain, the world's financial superpower for more than 2 centuries, is bankrupt. Its national debt has surged to 249% of GDP. After 2 devastating world wars, the empire that once ruled the seas is financially exhausted, and everyone in the room knows it. So they do something that has happened only a few times in history. They transfer global reserve currency status from one empire to another, from the British pound to the American dollar. But this was not merely a financial handover. It was the continuation of a pattern that has repeated itself for more than 5 centuries. A predictable cycle of rise, peak, overexpansion, and collapse. Every world reserve currency has followed the same life cycle, and today, the US dollar is showing the same warning signs that appeared before the 4 currencies that came before it. To understand what may happen next, we must look back. In 1450, Portugal was on the rise. Portugal became the world's first true reserve currency power. For nearly 80 years, Portugal dominated global trade. This was no accident. Portugal revolutionized navigation and global commerce by opening new sea routes to Africa, Asia, and the Americas. After the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople in 1453, the Old Spice routes were blocked by rival powers. Portugal found a way, literally sailing around Africa and launching a new age of discovery. Lisbon became the center of the trading world. The Portuguese real was accepted across continents, from Europe to Asia. At its peak, the Portuguese Empire stretched across Africa, India, Malaysia, Japan, and even into China through Macau. But as always, success led to overreach. Maintaining military outposts across 4 continents drained the Portuguese treasury. Competition from the Dutch, the British, and the French intensified. Then came the royal succession crisis of the 1530s, destabilizing the kingdom. In 1580, Spain absorbed Portugal into the Iberian Union. For 80 years, Portuguese silver dominated world trade, and then it was replaced by Spanish silver. Spain's rise began with silver. The richest silver deposit in the world lay high in the Bolivian Andes. Potosí Mountain, discovered in 1545. Between 1575 and 1635, it produced nearly half of the world's silver. The Spanish minted their famous pieces of 8 in Potosí, marked with the letter P. These coins became the first truly global currency. The Spanish dollar became the most stable and trusted currency in the Western world from the 16th to the 19th century. It was even legal tender in the United States until 1857. Spain's dominance lasted roughly 110 years, from the 1530s to the 1640s. But then the familiar pattern returned: overexpansion and crushing debt. Charles I left his son Philip II a massive debt burden, 36 million ducats, along with an annual deficit of 1 million ducats. Philip II defaulted on Spain's debts 4 separate times, in 1557, 1560, 1575, and 1596. The endless flow of silver from the New World triggered massive inflation. Prices in Spain quadrupled during his reign. When silver production was cut in half during the reign of Philip III, the Spanish economy collapsed, leading to another bankruptcy. By 1641, the Iberian Union had dissolved. Spain's monetary dominance was over. A new financial power was rising: the Dutch Republic. In the 1600s, Amsterdam became the world's leading financial center. Backed by innovation and trade, the Dutch guilder emerged as Europe's de facto reserve currency. The Bank of Amsterdam established efficient and reliable systems for international payments. Dutch merchants and investors pioneered modern finance. They created the world's first stock exchange, marine insurance, and new financial instruments such as transferable credit and publicly traded company shares. From 1642 to 1720, roughly 78 years, the Dutch guilder dominated global trade, accounting for more than 1/3 of all international transactions. But even the Dutch fell into the same trap. Military overextension, especially during the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War between 1780 and 1784, pushed the country toward bankruptcy. The Dutch East India Company collapsed under the pressure of its conflicts with Britain. By the late 1700s, Britain had taken its place. Backed by industrial power and a vast colonial empire, the British pound became the next global reserve currency. From the 1720s to 1944, more than 2 centuries, sterling dominated world trade longer than any modern currency. At the peak of British dominance, more than 60% of global trade was invoiced in pounds. London became a global hub for insurance, commodities, and investment. The gold standard further strengthened sterling's supremacy, and after the major monetary reform of 1816, Britain's currency was regarded as the most stable in the world. By 1922, The British Empire controlled 458 million people, 1/5 of the world's population, and a quarter of the world's landmass. British financial power seemed unbreakable. Then came the familiar decline. World War I raised Britain's national debt from £650 million in 1914 to over £7 billion in 1919. World War II was even more devastating. By 1945, government debt had reached 270% of GDP. Britain had won the war, but lost its financial throne. Which brings us back to Bretton Woods in 1944. Between July 1st and July 22nd, more than 700 delegates from 44 allied nations met to rebuild the global financial system. Their agreement established the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, what we now know as the World Bank. The Bretton Woods system pegged every major currency to the US dollar and the dollar to gold at $35 per ounce. The transition from sterling to the dollar was now official. For the next quarter century, the US dollar maintained its dominance until 1971, when President Richard Nixon suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold. The gold standard was gone, but the dollar did not collapse. Instead, it found a new anchor: oil. After the 1973 OPEC oil crisis, the United States reached a strategic agreement with Saudi Arabia. In exchange for American military protection, Saudi oil would be priced and sold exclusively in US dollars. By 1975, every OPEC member had agreed to the same arrangement. Thus, the petrodollar system was born. Because every country needed oil, and oil required dollars, global demand for the US dollar became artificially reinforced. This allowed the United States to run massive budget deficits that would crush most other currencies. For decades, the dollar's dominance went largely unchallenged. At its peak in 2000, more than 70% of the world's foreign exchange reserves were held in US dollars. But the numbers are changing. By 2024, that share had fallen to 57.8%. Foreign ownership of US Treasury securities has declined from over 50% during the 2008 financial crisis to just 30% by early 2025. De-dollarization is accelerating. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the UAE. Together, they are building financial systems that bypass the dollar entirely. As of 2025, the 10 BRICS members and 13 partner countries are developing the BRICS Bridge payment network to settle transactions using central bank digital currencies. Meanwhile, America's own balance sheet is under pressure. As of March 6, 2025, total US public liabilities stood at $36.4 trillion, including $29 trillion in federal debt and $7.4 trillion in other obligations. That equals 124% of GDP, and once again the pattern looks familiar. Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, and Britain all followed the same trajectory. Their dominance lasted between 78 and 220 years, averaging 95 years. The US dollar has now served as the world's reserve currency for 81 years since Bretton Woods. We are approaching a historical inflection point. Every reserve currency passes through 4 stages: rise, peak, overexpansion, and decline. Stage 1. Rise. A nation gains dominance through innovation in trade, finance, or military power. Portugal mastered global navigation. Spain flooded the world with silver. The Dutch built modern finance. Britain reshaped global trade through the Industrial Revolution. America rose through post-war industrial power. Stage 2. Peak. The reserve currency becomes nearly universal, used in more than 60% of global transactions. The empire appears untouchable. Stage 3. Overexpansion. This is where cracks begin to show. Massive military spending, rising debt, declining productivity. Portugal stretched across 4 continents. Spain defaulted repeatedly. The Dutch bankrupted themselves fighting Britain. Britain's debt reached 270% of GDP after the World Wars. The United States today carries debt equal to 124% of GDP and has spent over $8 trillion on Middle East wars. Stage 4. Decline. The reserve currency loses confidence and power shifts elsewhere. Every empire has faced this reckoning. What happens next? History offers clues. Portugal never regained its former influence. Spain entered centuries of decline despite immense New World wealth. The Netherlands remained prosperous but became a regional power. Britain, though still wealthy, saw its empire dissolve and its global dominance fade after 1945. By the 1950s, 55% of global reserves were still held in sterling. Within 2 decades, that share had fallen sharply. Britain's century ended. The American century began. But such transitions do not happen overnight. Britain's decline took decades. The United States economically surpassed Britain long before. The dollar replaced sterling as the dominant currency. A similar gradual shift may now be unfolding, this time with China and a rising multipolar world. The average lifespan of a reserve currency has been 95 years, but the US dollar is now 81 years into its reign. The signs look familiar. A decline in global market share from 70% to 58%. Falling foreign demand for treasuries. The rise of BRICS alternatives. Weakening petrodollar agreements. An extensive military presence. 900 bases in 130 countries. This is the pattern that has defined 5 centuries. Economic history repeats. The only remaining question is how fast the transition will occur. And who will lead the next financial era? Will it be gradual, like Britain's slow decline? Or sudden, like the Dutch collapse? Will a single new power emerge? Or will the future be multipolar, with several reserve currencies sharing global influence? History does not repeat perfectly, but it rhymes. And if the rhyme holds true, we may be approaching the later chapters of dollar dominance. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and send it to someone who wonders how money, power, and history always move in cycles.